Let's explore the output node in BuildShip. Just because the output node is usually the last node in your workflow, mean it's the least important node. In fact, without the output node, there would be no way for your BuildShip workflow to return information to the outside world. And speaking of the outside world, the output node gives you complete control over how your workflow communicates with the outside world. So whether you're building API endpoints or creating complex automation flows, the output node has got you covered. We'll break down two main ways you can use the output node. First, using custom output, and then we'll look at the last node output. To help us explore the output node, we'll create a new BuildShip workflow. Let's say that we want to build an API that will return users data. So we'll call our flow users API, and we'll create it. And by default, whenever you create a brand new BuildShip workflow, there will always be a flow output at the end. Now let's talk about the custom output. This is perfect when you need precise control over your workflow's response. To get started using custom output, we'll want to switch from the last node output to custom output. And when using custom output, we can define exactly the fields we want to return. For example, let's say that we want to return a message. We can enter hello world. And let's test our flow. And then here you can see we're getting back the text hello world. Since we're building a users API, what we want to return are fields related to users. So we're going to return the user name and age. We can start adding new fields here by clicking the Add Output button. But before we do that, we want to edit the existing output input and we'll want to rename it. To do that, you can click the three dot icon and you can click Configure. Then we'll change the name of the label to name. And then we'll click Save. Now we'll add a new field output for the user's age. So we'll add a custom output. This time the type will be a number. And then for now, we'll just enter 18. But we don't want the label to be number. So let's change that. We'll just go to configure. And instead of number, we'll say age. And we'll save. And notice the difference now when we test our flow. Interesting. We're getting back a JSON object. But how is that possible? Well, this is made possible because BuildShip automatically creates the perfect JSON structure for us. So there's no more need for you to have to manually define JSON formatting for your workflow responses. As it currently stands, our flow output node is returning some hard-coded values for the name and age. But just like how you can access the output of a node from other nodes, you can, in the flow output node, access the output of nodes. Let's see that in action. We'll start by generating a random name. Let's add a new node, and then we can search for name. And then conveniently, BuildShip provides a generate unique name that we can use to generate a random name. We'll add the node. The dictionary's input is controlling the type of names we want to generate. So if we look at the first input here, we have adjectives. And then the second input, we have animals. So we want to delete the second one, and then we'll update this to names. And if we test this node, we get back a random name. Now, instead of returning a fixed value for the name, we'll delete this. And then we'll go to edit, and then we'll select the output of the generate unique name node. Next, we'll generate a random number for the age. We'll add a new node, search for number, and then we'll add this get random number node. We'll leave the minimum number to generate out 1, and we'll change the max to 50. If we test this node, we get back a random number. So now instead of having the age hard-coded, we'll delete this, we'll edit, delete this, go to variables, and then select the output of the get random number node. And now we can test our workflow, but we are getting an error. Why are we getting an error? Well, if we scroll down, you can see that the flow output node adds validations to the fields you're returning. So for the name input, it needs to be a string. Here, the error message is telling us that the generate unique name node is not returning a string. But when we tested the node, we did get back a string. So there's a slight issue with the generate unique name node. The node is configured to return an object, but it's actually returning a string. But there's no need to panic here. This will be a good way for us to show you how to actually fix a validation error like this. Bring up the code for the node, and we'll go to output. And instead of returning an object, we'll change it to a string, and then we'll save. And now you can see that just by doing that, the validation error message for the name input field has been cleared. And we're good to go. So now we can test the flow and make sure we select flow and test. Nice, it's working. If we test the flow again, we'll get a random output, and it changes every time we test the flow. Next, let's look at how to use the last node output option. This is basically BuildShip's way of saying, just use whatever came out of the previous node. Let's say that we changed our mind, and instead of returning the user's name and age, we just wanted to return the user's age. And since the get random number node is what we're using to generate a random age, what we can do is instead of using custom output here, we could switch it to use the last node output. And you can see here that the output has now been updated to the get random number node. And if we test this flow, this time we'll only get the age returned. Using the last node output is perfect for simpler workflows where you don't need custom status codes or error handling, or necessarily need full customization over the fields you want to return from your workflow. By using the last node output option, our workflow will just return whatever the previous node returned. We'll cover one final aspect of the flow output node, and that is how to configure status codes. This is where things get really interesting. The output node gives you precise control over the status codes you want to return, which is crucial for API endpoints. For example, you can update the status code to 200 for successful responses, or 400 for client errors, or 500 for internal server errors. And there's a number of additional HTTP status codes that you can set. But here's the really cool part. You can make these dynamic. That is, you can set up conditional status codes based on your workflow's execution. For example, let's say that we wanted to update our user's API. Given our user's age, we want to validate if they can drink alcohol or not. To begin, we'll delete the existing nodes we have in our workflow. We'll add a new input. This will be a number, and we'll name this age. Next, if you want to set up your workflow to conditionally return status codes based on the logic of your workflow, then in most cases, you'll want to add a branch node. We can use the branch node to conditionally control the execution of our workflow. For the condition here, we'll add a new condition. And for the value, we'll enter our age input. And we want to check if the user's age is greater than or equal to the legal drinking age, which is 21. Or it might be different depending on where you're from. But this will be our condition. So if the user age is greater than or equal to 21, we want to return an OK response from our workflow. We can also return a generic message like, you can drink. If the user's age is less than 21, that means that it's illegal for them to drink. So we'll want to return output node with some error status code. To begin, we can delete this flow output node. And then under the then case, we can add a new output node. Let's just clear out these previous fields we used when we were showing the custom output node. And now we can just add a brand new output, add custom output string, and we'll say here for the text, you are allowed to drink. We can then change the label from string to something more meaningful. A quicker way of updating the label names for your output is by just clicking on the label name. Then instead of string, we'll change this to message. And we'll want to expand the additional options, and we want to select a status code here. Since they have the green light to drink, we'll select a OK status code. On the contrary, if they're under 21, means they can't drink, we'll add a new node, a new output node. We'll leave the custom output option selected. And then this time for the message, we'll say, you are not allowed to drink. Expand additional property, and let's select a status code. And the one that makes the most sense to use here is the 403 forbidden status. We'll select that. And that's really all there is to setting up your workflow to conditionally return an output and status code depending on your workflow's logic. In BuildShip, it's very easy to connect different paths to different outputs in your workflow. And as an API builder, this means that you can handle success and error cases elegantly, all within this flow output node. In the next video, we'll explore how you can test and debug your BuildShip nodes and workflows.